Hey guys, I just finished watching Gen V, and the ending made me remember just like how much I missed Homelander in my life. And that's about all I'm gonna say for like the ending of the show as far as spoilers go. I went on to fill that Homelander-sized gap in my heart by rewatching a bunch of scenes from the show, and I realized that some of his best scenes are right alongside another immensely interesting character, Stan Edgar, the CEO of Vought. The dialogue that these two share between each other, and just like the overall construction of the scenes, are actually phenomenal, and I think they'd be a great learning opportunity for other writers hoping to improve their own dialogue. See, like, there's a ton of stuff happening underneath the hood concerning the writing of these scenes that are not easy to recognize if you don't know what you're looking for. Luckily, I've been working as a script and novel editor as well as a novelist myself for pretty much a decade now, so hopefully I can break down some of these elements into easy, understandable pieces that you can use yourself. This dialogue dive will be a tad different from previous ones though, as instead of focusing on just one scene, we will be focusing on the writing of power dynamics through multiple scenes. This is because while Homelander and Stan Edgar have incredibly engaging scenes, they actually only share 4 moments together, and each one beautifully progresses the power dynamic between them. And to that end, we will be breaking down 4 components of dialogue-based narrative power dynamics, and the best way to do that is to start with what power actually is. Luckily, we are given a pretty good definition early on.
Real power isn't this. It's the ability to bend the world to your will. You would decide what the 7 do.
This is pretty much right on the money, especially when talking about narratives. From a literary perspective, this concept is called agency. Agency is the ability for a character to affect the conflict in a narrative. If a character is constantly reacting to things happening to them, they have low agency. If a character is doing things that force others to react, they have high agency. Now, typically in fiction, agency and therefore power often does come from characters being stronger, faster, and more destructive. This is because through the use of these abilities, a character can bend the world to their will. Think of literally like any powerful villain, Ozai, Thanos, Aku, and you will see how their abilities give them the power to shape the world. Homelander fits into this category. Because he sees himself as strong enough to force others into submission, he sees himself as having power.
Ashley, don't look at him, look at me! Ashley! Look at me!
Sorry.
However, a character does not need supernatural abilities to have power or agency. They only need to have the resources to affect the world around them, and by extension, the conflict. This is where Vought CEO Stan Edgar is. Even with no literal superpowers, he controls the most powerful company on the planet, along with basically the US government, and shapes the world through those means. This then indicates that no matter how individually fast, strong, or invincible a character is, if they cannot use those resources to affect the conflict or the world, they do not have agency or power in the narrative. These fundamentals are how we will go about understanding Homelander and Stan Edgar's power dynamics and how the dialogue alters it through their continued interactions. Now, the second element that we will break down is the actual construction of power dynamics between the characters. Let's look at how Homelander and Stan are introduced in relation to each other.
And use that fear to control us.
Morning.
Mr. Edgar, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Samantha.
Busy day?
Morning, Homelander. To what do I owe the pleasure?
Well, you never come up to 99, so figured I'd pay you a visit.
Now, you probably noticed a lot here just in 10 seconds. Homelander barges into Stan's office without an appointment and then brushes off the secretary. Then, Homelander says because Stan never comes to see him, he is coming to see Stan. And finally, we can see that Stan Edgar's dialogue is very cordial and respectful even during the rude intrusion. This may all seem small, but it's dialogue that allows Homelander to play on the perceived power dynamic, both that he and the audience perceives. These opening few moments are literally a power move. He's entering into Stan's space and demanding his time and attention. Invasion of territory is like the most basic primal form of authority display. We continue to see Homelander press his continued perceived power over Stan too. He puts his feet up on Stan's furniture and then threatens him with the collapse of the company.
How do you think your shareholders would feel about that?
All this dialogue and all these actions come back to the fundamentals that we discussed. Homelander, in this moment, believes he has the power to bend the world to his will. He believes that he has complete control over Stan Edgar because Vought as a company relies on soups, and Homelander is the best soup of them all. Homelander believes there would be no Vought without him.
Oh, of course you know how important you are to everyone at Vought.
No, Stan. I am Vought.
This is why he's acting so pompous and threatening. And to start this interaction favored towards Homelander was a really smart choice by the writers. See, we watchers are automatically going to think that in any situation that Homelander's in, he holds the power. Almost without fail, he's used his strength and terror to force individual interactions to his will. So going into this scene with Stan Edgar, who's literally being introduced into the show for the first time, I'm pretty sure, we watchers would obviously think the same thing. Again, Stan's just a guy. Sure, he runs Vought, but he's literally just a guy. What this initial interaction between Homelander and Stan does is set up a phenomenal moment of subversion, leading to Stan completely owning Homelander down the line. The writers used dialogue to make us expect X, while what they really gave us was Y. And because of us experiencing the first half of the scene with Homelander holding the power, the second half when Edgar takes control appears even more dramatic. This is something that I tell my clients all the time. The deeper you dig into the drama initially, the higher your climax will be later. The first thing that Stan Edgar does to establish power isn't even dialogue, but it's arguably the most important moment. He simply doesn't react. Homelander, the most dangerous man in the world, mind you, threatened him and Vought, but Stan Edgar simply allows him to sit in silence. Sometimes a lack of dialogue is just as important as the dialogue itself. Here, by refusing to react to Homelander's threat, Stan Edgar is refusing to allow Homelander to shape him to his will. Homelander is looking for Stan to fear him, something we'll get into later, but Stan doesn't give it to him. Stan Edgar instantly shifts the power dynamic by establishing that Homelander has no power over him. He signals to Homelander that he has no agency in this moment. The next thing that Stan Edgar does to raise himself in the power dynamic is to ignore whatever Homelander is saying and starts telling a completely different story. This is actually a tried and true power move by villains and powerful characters that you've seen many times before.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Well, you look nervous. Is it the scars? You want to know how I got them?
When a character goes into a monologue about a story or anecdote, it's a dialogue tool to show that they are commandeering complete control of the conversation.
What do you know about Frederick Vought?
Excuse me?
Frederick Vought.
Redneck hillbilly, strolling along country lane, talking about the Garden of Eden. The redneck, drinking whiskey as he walks. Believes that Adam and Eve had every right to take that apple.
Characters who do moves like this are generally meant to be perceived as wise or cunning, which Stan Edgar is both of. But at the same time, these anecdotes always relate to the initial power struggle or conflict at hand. Stan Edgar's story, by revealing Vought's history and what they really want, their goals, it sets up dialogue for him to demolish all the power Homelander thought he had in the dynamic.
After all, you run a superhero company and you never check in with your superheroes, do you?
You are under a misconception that we are a superhero company. We are not. What we are, really, is a pharmaceutical company.
I am Vought.
You are not our most valuable asset. That would be our confidential formula for Compound V.
Like, I don't know, around the hiring of that girl, for example.
You wish to be consulted on Stormfront?
Oh, why not?
I don't have to consult you about Stormfront or anything else.
These lines of dialogue aren't just Stan Edgar being mean. That's not how power dynamics are established. What these lines of dialogue do is take away Homelander's power to affect the conflict, or in other words, it takes away his agency. Through Stan Edgar's dialogue, both the audience and Homelander realize that Stan Edgar holds all the power to bend the world to his will. In this power dynamic, Stan is on top even though Homelander is more physically powerful. This is how a power dynamic is established. One character can enact change in the narrative while another cannot. As I tell my clients, the process by which this is achieved in each of your individual stories will of course be unique, but this scene lays down the general guidelines for using dialogue to accomplish this. The next element we will break down is how the writers utilize Stan Edgar's elevated position in the power dynamic to keep Homelander in check, and it all stems from just a few lines in the initial scene. Here they are.
You wish to be consulted on Stormfront?
Oh, why not? I signed off on all the rest. I'm the leader of the Seven.
For which you have my undying respect.
See, I don't think I do.
One of the key aspects of dialogue is the fact that it acts as a window into characterization. Whenever a character uses dialogue to express their position of power, they also conversely express their vulnerabilities. This is because whatever makes the character strong, if absent, would leave them vulnerable. For Homelander, he delivered dialogue which indicated that part of his identity and authority came from selecting all the members of the Seven as captain. Homelander lives to be the leader of the superhero group, and he takes it as a personal affront when that leadership is undermined. This is the entire reason he barged into Stan Edgar's office in the first place. Unfortunately for Homelander though, Stan Edgar realized this and honed in on the weakness Homelander unwittingly conveyed. And he did this by eventually robbing Homelander's control of the Seven, the very thing he lives for.
But you have restored a wholesome, trustworthy image to the company when we needed it the most, which is why the board wants to make you co-captain of the Seven.
What?
Co-captain?
Stan Edgar is doing this power play to purposefully, publicly humiliate Homelander. He wants Homelander to know his place.
You know that he can probably hear you.
Good. I hope he does. Starlight, real power isn't this.
And the reason this is happening is because Stan Edgar has a very particular way of seeing the world. And we know this through dialogue. When Homelander burst into his office, Stan took that as a challenge to his authority in the power dynamic. Stan Edgar felt that this challenge could not go unpunished, or else the power dynamic would shift. He lays out his ideology blatantly to Vicky Newman later.
We never go after Homelander. It is practically federal policy.
No one is going after anyone. Just a gentle reminder of who's in charge. I assume you saw him on Cameron Coleman this morning. He's testing boundaries, and when that happens, you have to discipline them like a parent would.
All this is important because Homelander has control over the Seven as a substitute for his lack of control over the outer world. Effectively, being the leader of the Seven gives him agency because he can bend its members to his will.
It is a South Korean delicacy.
Holy it's Timothy. Oh my God. It's Timothy. He's my friend. I can't eat him. I'm not gonna eat him.
Oh, yes, you can. Deep. Timothy is delicious.
We see this time and time again. He will simply make members do things because he can. He likes having control over them.
No more lies. You go ahead and scream.
So Stan Edgar, as both a power move and a punishment, takes this control away from Homelander. A great example of this is in their third scene together at a rehearsal.
If Starlight doesn't want to sing, she doesn't sing.
Stan! What a surprise!
Our testing shows that 76% of likely viewers will make every effort to watch tonight for Starlight. As for you, 53% might DVR.
This is one of Homelander's lowest moments so far, because not only does he have no agency in the real world, he cannot even bend his constructed world to his will. Stan Edgar has completely robbed him of everything that gave him power and purpose, and he did so by focusing on Homelander's strengths that also acted as his vulnerabilities. However, The street runs both ways, and as any well-paced narrative would do, Homelander was given his time for revenge by using the same methods against Stan Edgar. Just as Homelander revealed his vulnerabilities, so did Stan Edgar.
Well, let me remind you. You slipped Compound B to terrorists all over the globe to get you and your cronies into national defense. But maybe at the cost of destroying the whole company.
I don't think I appreciate your tone, sir.
Vought as a company, its shareholders, and its stocks are what's important to Stan. And even though it's only hinted at in the scene, the other most important thing to him is his adoptive daughter, Victoria Newman. So Homelander does the exact same thing that Stan did to him. He takes away everything that gave him power. He ousts him from Vought, publicly shames him, and gets his own daughter to betray him.
Homelander has bravely come forward as a whistleblower and provided evidence of crimes committed within Vought by CEO Stan Edgar.
And in the final scene with Homelander and Stan Edgar together, we see Homelander arrive to gloat, to see Stan just as pathetic as he was. Based upon everything that we've broken down, with Stan Edgar's resources to change the world and affect the conflict gone, Homelander should clearly be on top in terms of the power dynamic. Stan Edgar is as weak as he's ever been, but even so, we get an exact repeat of the power dynamics in the very first scene.
But that does not mean that Vought can use that fear to control us.
Morning.
Mr. Edgar, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Samantha.
Busy day?
Morning, Homelander. You do have a hell of a view from up here. I'll give you that.
You should see it from space. How do you think your shareholders would feel about that? Your entire life is imploding, and it's as if you're reading fucking John Grisham.
While you're preening at the Golden Globes, we are busy running around like maniacs trying to clean up the mess you made. Eventually, probably soon, the world will recognize you for the pitiful disappointment you are. I don't have to consult you about Stormfront or anything else. You are not worthy of my respect. You are not a god. That you are under a misconception that we are a superhero company. We are not. What we are, really, is a pharmaceutical company. And you are not our most valuable asset. You are simply bad product.
Stan Edgar somehow remains dominant in the power dynamic, even with all of his strengths taken away. This scene and the sequence of dialogue is super cool for two reasons. Firstly, it reveals just what type of antagonist Stan Edgar really is. What I mean by this is that in many fictions where the antagonist is defeated or at least stripped of their power, we get to see who they are truly. Conflict always reveals true character, and the more serious the conflict, the more genuine the character revelation will be. Some villains only maintain their composure and imposing demeanor through power. Their true fragility and weakness is showcased when they lose their authority and power. Great examples of this are Light Yagami and Azula, who both descend into raving madness and emotional collapses when they are defeated. We see how pathetic and unenviable they actually are without the power to prop them up. Conversely though, there are some characters that when defeated, maintain their confidence and composure because it did not come from external power, but from who they were as people. Spoilers for Breaking Bad, I guess, like 10 years later. But the example of this that I think is best comes from Gus Fring. Even in death, with his face literally halfway blown off, he remains calm, cool, and collected, because that's simply who he was. Other characters in this paradigm include Elena Tyrell just before her death, or Lord Beckett just before his. All this is to say that Homelander assumed that because Stan no longer had power to bend the world to his will, at least on a large scale level, Stan would be groveling and weak and pathetic. This would finally give Homelander the opportunity to bend Stan to his will, to have agency and power in the dynamic. However, what Homelander discovered was that Stan Edgar's power did not come from Vought or external resources. Stan Edgar's power came from his own self-certainty and authority. This is why Homelander could never have power over Stan. The beautiful writing of the boys is that Homelander is literally the most powerful man in the world, but is also deeply, tragically insecure, and has no feeling of self-worth or self-confidence.
A little respect, Stan. Something you should have given me.
What good would that do? Where would it even go? But to the bottomless, gaping pit of insecurity you call a soul.
His self-identity is completely made up of how others view him. Because of this, he must manufacture confidence through his control of others. Stan Edgar, though, is completely self-secure and needs no external validation for his authority. And because of this, because Stan knows that Homelander is weak and pathetic underneath his bravado, Stan doesn't fear Homelander or anything he could do to him.
Unbelievable. 80 over 60. Your entire life is imploding, and it's as if you're reading fucking John Grisham.
Homelander and Stan Edgar's narrative power dynamic is the classic example of the man who must tell everyone he is strong versus the man who knows himself that he is strong.
No, Stan. I am Vought.
I am the king! I will punish you.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
No way. I mean, you saw him.
He can get as pissy as he wants. As long as I am CEO of Vought, he's under control.
The king is tired. See him to his chambers.
Come along.
I'm not tired.
We have so much to celebrate.
I believe you have a premiere of Tech Night Lives to go to?
But that then brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Why doesn't Homelander just kill Stan Edgar? As much as we talk about power dynamics and agency, when you get down to it, Homelander is literally more powerful than Stan. We've seen him kill people before, plenty of them. So what stops him now? Well, let's break this down because this is the fourth and final dialogue element that we'll get into. What the dialogue of all these scenes that went over does is continue and deepen the theme of Homelander's childish, stunted mindset. And I don't mean that like figuratively, I mean the show has literally set him up to have the mind of a child. Because of the experiments performed on him when he was a kid, Homelander never mentally progressed into an adult. And this theme of his character was perfectly showcased in his relationship with Madeline Stillwell in season 1. Remember, Homelander sees himself as Vought. Unlike all the other supes, he has no alternate identity. We never see him out of his costume. His identity as an individual is inextricably merged with Vought and the adulation it provides him. Therefore, when Madeline Stillwell becomes his handler at Vought, his authority figure in the workplace, he saw her as his mother. Homelander could not separate his corporate identity from his personal identity because they are one in the same, which means that he looked to Madeline to provide him the attention and affection that he did not get from a real maternal authority figure. The whole reason he ended up killing Madeline was because of jealousy and insecurity over her sharing her affection with another child. Why do I explain all this? Because this is the character theme that was then furthered in season 2. Because where Homelander viewed Madeline as his corporate and therefore personal mother, season 2 sees him viewing Stan Edgar as his corporate father. Stan is the CEO of Vought after all, the quote-unquote head of the family. Homelander's entire conflict with Stan is that of an insecure, rebellious teen striving for the approval of his father but never getting it. And again, this is not a hypothetical interpretation of the literature like the curtains were blue. The 4 scenes we watched were filled with dialogue that established a parent-child relationship.
Our most valuable asset. That would be our confidential formula for compound V, which you, man-child that you are, released into the wild.
I don't think I appreciate your tone, sir. So, how about I just walk, Stan? How would that rate?
After the PR hole you dug for yourself this past year, I'd say you're lucky we're putting on this farce at all. But hey, it's your party. You can cry if you want to.
He's testing boundaries, and when that happens, you have to discipline them like A parent would.
You know that he can probably hear you.
Good. I hope he does.
Truly, you're not even pathetic. You're just nothing.
Then why are you still here? Looking for my approval, like I'm your daddy? And even if I were, what would there be to approve of?
And I think all this dialogue, along with Homelander's reaction to it, gives us an answer as to why Homelander doesn't kill Stan like he killed Madeline or others. Homelander is so insecure that he literally does not view himself as powerful. And furthermore, Homelander is intimidated by Stan Edgar's self-security. He said as much.
Oh, God. You wanna know something? I used to be intimidated by you. I did. And now I look at you, I have no idea why.
The only people that Homelander aggressed across the first 2 seasons were people that feared him. Homelander had no concept of personal power and authority. His perception of authority and power came not from his own strength, but from how he could make others feel weak. And once he perceives you as weak and fearful of him, it's over. That's it. He will kill you. This is why Homelander barged into Stan's office and threatened him and stared. He was waiting to see Stan's reaction, listening to his heartbeat. He was waiting and searching for a crack in Stan's self-security, but there wasn't one. He does it again after ousting Stan from Vought. He's searching for, craving for a reaction so he can see Stan as weak, but he never gets an opening. The dialogue of the scenes we are given is so well written that we perfectly understand both of these men and where they stand in the power dynamic. Homelander can't kill Stan because he can only be validated through the fear or adulation of others. And since Stan Edgar feels nothing for Homelander save for pity and disgust, Homelander can't act against him because he literally feels inferior to him. The dialogue contained within the scene does a great job of executing both the overt and subtle aspects of the power dynamic between Homelander and Stan, along with furthering the character theme that Homelander has a childlike nature. I hope that by breaking all these components down, you all can become more comfortable with the execution of dialogue and grow more confident with your own writing. If you find dialogue breakdowns like this cool, check out my website to hire me on to look at your own work or schedule coaching sessions. I'd love to work with you guys. I will leave links in the description below. Check out my Patreon if you want to help too, and buy my books if you want to see how I write stories myself. As always, it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you all again soon.